We're back with another Wedgwood Coffee Break conversation with one of the many incredible staff at Wedgwood. Today I'm excited to be chatting with Scott. Thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, how long you've been a part of the Wedgwood team, and what you do here?
Yeah, so I work at the Vander Ark program, and I have had kind of a range of jobs since I've been at Wedgwood, but I've been here nearly 8 years in several different roles. So currently, I get to serve as the therapist for the Vander Ark program. We're a program that serves kids with cognitive impairments, developmental disabilities, and a lot of other things going on in their lives. And so I've been in that role for a few years now, and I actually had the privilege of working in the home as a direct care staff when I first started right out of college. So
great. So now that you're the therapist in the Vander Ark residential home, can you talk a little bit more about the program and the kids that it serves?
Yeah, so like I said, we kind of big picture, of course, we're a part of the system of care for kids most often experiencing foster care. So within that, then we specialize in working with those kids who have either developmental disabilities such as autism spectrum disorder, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, or other developmental disabilities, as well as just general cognitive impairments. So a lot of times those are coupled, of course, with experiencing a lot of trauma in their childhood and the fact that they're in foster care needing a place to stay. The reason that the referral would come to us, of course, is that they either don't have a home in the community or the parents that they live with just need some assistance, and we can ideally get them back to their home. But the reality is that we end up with a lot of kids who need our services for a pretty good amount of time. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to get to work with these kids, and you get to develop some pretty long-term relationships.
Mm-hmm. How old are the kids in Vander Ark typically?
Yeah, so the kids, technically, we're contracted to work with kids, I believe, maybe 8 and up through 18 years old. And so we tend to try and make that a bit more homogenous. And so we end up with a lot of older teens. So mm-hmm. about 14 to 18 is about our wheelhouse, but we could take younger kids as well.
I think I saw somewhere that the average stay for a kid in Vander Ark is over 500 days.
Yeah.
So that's pretty tough, but the goal is to hopefully get them to a place where they can succeed outside of Wedgwood.
Absolutely. It's this weird balance for me where residential is a really hard place to be. Mm-hmm. Of course, we've got amazing people here doing amazing work, and I'd like to think that we love these kids as well as anybody can. But the reality is this is not a place that kids should be for a long period of time. So unfortunately, a lot of the kids that come to Vander Ark, they don't have a whole lot of other options. And mm-hmm. so they might come with the goal of adoption. They might come with the goal of reunification. They could come with the goal of APLA, which means another planned permanent living arrangement, such as adult foster care. Mm-hmm. And the unfortunate reality is I'd like to tell you that we get a lot of kids back home, but most of the kids that we see, they don't have that option, and there aren't people in their lives currently who can give them that opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of adoption workers and other people working behind the scenes trying to find families. Mm-hmm. And the reality is there's not enough families. And so we have kids who stay here quite a long time. Mm-hmm. And like I said, that's not anything I would wish for any of our kids, but if it needs to happen, I'd like to think that we're a really good place to be those people, to mm-hmm. be to be the people who can show these kids that despite all of the crap you've gone through, we love you, we care about you, and we're going to see you through this as long as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I know Dan, our CEO, has said before that he describes it as we see kids at what is hopefully the worst time of their life. And as unfortunate as that we need to have a place like Wedgwood, but also thank goodness that there is a place like Wedgwood, because if it weren't, where would these kids be?
Absolutely. I think about that often of I don't want any of these kids to be here, and I want to discharge them all tomorrow. I would miss them gravely if I did. But it's important for us as a system and as Wedgewood and as Vander Ark to keep that perspective of we're supposed to be just a brief period of their life, but we're going to pour everything we have into it while we can.
And I know every kid's story is different, but generally, what sorts of backgrounds and challenges are the kids in Vander Ark coming to Wedgwood with? So what are some of the reasons that they've needed to get to a place like Wedgwood?
Yeah, a lot of abuse and neglect, of course. That can mean pretty big instances of trauma, but most often it means complex trauma that's occurred over a vast majority of their childhood. With our kids specifically, that trauma has then also been compounded by more differences in their cognition and some of the uniquenesses of their brains. And so those two things work together in very unique ways sometimes. So to have trauma and to have developmental disabilities or cognitive impairments, it can be a challenge trying to figure out which intervention and which modality is going to work the best for each kid in each moment. But yeah, kids come here with a lot of different experiences pretty much across the board in the Vander Ark home. They've experienced loss in their life, trauma of some sort, and 100% of them have either a developmental disability or a cognitive impairment.
And probably, unfortunately, not had the right supports along the way to help them with their disabilities.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can get referrals for a wide range of services that the kids have already engaged in. So, for example, we have a client who has basically been missed by the system for the large majority of her life. Really hasn't largely ever even been in school, hasn't received services for her specific developmental disability. Some stuff that evidence shows would have been very impactful for her at a young age. But now we have the opportunity. So it's like, okay, the what ifs are out of the window. She didn't get those services when she needed them, but like, here we are, let's do it. And in that case, it's really fertile ground for growth, getting to kind of be the first people who've not only provided her services, but provided her the most important pieces, which is just stability, safety, care, food, clothing, those kinds of things. And from that, like, the growth already we're seeing is exponential. So then comparatively, we of course get other kids who have been shuffled around the system for years and years and years. Institutionalization is a phrase we use a lot, of course, because we don't want our kids to become so used to the confines and I can't come up with the right word, but we don't want our kids to get used to the fact that they've got all these confines around them and these rules which aren't going to translate into the community. And so we get some kids who've unfortunately been shuffled around from place to place, and hopefully we can be the place that sticks and provides them the services that they need, and then to get them on to the next thing, which is hopefully even bigger and better.
I imagine sitting in a counseling room for formal talk therapy with kids who have been shuffled around the system and really lack stability and have all these different cognitive abilities doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
So what does therapy look like for them? How do you conduct your sessions?
Yeah, so that's actually one of my favorite things to talk about, because it's a unique aspect of my role as a therapist at Vander Ark, is that I get the leeway to do therapy in a wide range of contexts. So in some cases, I might have a client who can engage in some of those more talk therapy type of traditional CBT, DBT, those kinds of things. And so they can sit in my office, we can talk through some stuff, we can make progress. On the other hand, I might have a kid who literally can't speak. So we work with clients as well who are either largely nonverbal or just limited in their verbal skills. And so therapy from my end as a licensed clinician looks vastly different. And so really it means having to get creative. And I fall short a lot of the time, but you got to get creative about what you're going to do and how to meet them where they're at. So if they've got some particular niche interest, which is pretty common with kids with autism, for example, like trying to delve into that fully so I understand what's important to them and what they care about. And then if I can utilize some aspect of a video they really like, a song they really like, if there's something I can pull out of that to make a connection for them, then that's great. A lot of the time, therapy for me also looks like just trying to help with those functional life skills. So in some cases, that could mean literally helping with the shower, with hygiene routines, teaching them how to brush their teeth, tie their shoes, that kind of stuff. But also, that's what we have amazing staff at Vander Ark who are doing that type of therapy all day, every day. So while I'm the therapist, they're getting treatment every waking hour from people who care about them a lot, and that part in most cases is way more impactful than the best work I can do in a 50-minute talk therapy session isn't going to have the same type of impact of what the relationships they get to develop and the safety they get to experience, so that they can then start either processing through some stuff or learning new skills in those safe relationships.
That's interesting you said the relationships, because I was just thinking it sounds like the core of it is really just building a healthy relationship with them and the other staff in the building.
Yes, like I said, the fact that we have kids for pretty long term is a double-edged sword, because don't want them to be here, but it gives us the opportunity to have a really strong relationship with the kids, and I'd like to think we can get to the point where the relationship speaks louder than anything I say. Any advice I give, any therapy tools I give them, hopefully that's helpful, but I like to think that we get to the point where the relationship means more in terms of their long-term growth and the way that they view people, the world, and how they can feel safe and confident and proud as they move forward in their lives.
Yeah, seeing that there are safe adults that you can rely on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there an impactful story that has stuck with you?
Yes. There are many stories, especially having gotten to work with this specific population for nearly 8 years. A lot of different kids with unique factors. And the reality is, I don't want to paint an inaccurate picture. There's a lot of cases where we fall short. There's cases where, as a whole, the system fails these kids pretty regularly. And so we at Vander Ark and Wedgewood try and be those strong advocates for every day that we can. And then we just keep working hard, and then we get those cases where the outcomes are a little bit more obvious and positive, right? And so I think of one client who was here for a long duration of time. He came into care having experienced significant loss of his caretakers at a young age. He's, of course, got limitations cognitively as well. And when he came, he was not happy to be here. And, of course, that resulted in a lot of maladaptive behaviors and aggression towards people. So for years, we struggled and loved on this kid as best we could, and staff kept showing up and putting themselves honestly in harm's way many days, just because they knew that this kid deserved it and there was some stuff that he was working through. And so they just kept showing up. Eventually, we started seeing a little bit of the fruits of the labor, where he started feeling more comfortable. The period of time between these aggressive incidents was decreasing or increasing. He gained new opportunities, which had a huge impact on his life. So a couple things I want to highlight are we have an employment training program at Wedgwood that they took a chance and gave this kid the opportunity despite his limitations and the risk factors associated with it. And to see it was palpable, seeing the confidence growing in him and feeling like I can do something, I can be good at it, and when I fail, my boss is still going to have my back and be gracious to me, but they're going to give it to me straight. And so seeing him grow through that opportunity, then he also actually got to have a mentorship start with a staff from a totally separate department. Shout out Miss Sue. She wanted to be a mentor for him, so she jumped through a lot of hoops in order to be a support person in his life. And over time, that blossomed into, here we are, he's been discharged, and she's still, in my opinion, one of, if not the most important attachment figures in this kid's life. So to put it in context, you think of a kid who had significant attachment issues, lost the people that were supposed to care for him, or wasn't cared for in the way that he was supposed to. He acts out that frustration on people who can hopefully take it for a duration of time, and then when he's given these opportunities, they had so much bigger of an impact than all of the hours he and I spent together doing therapy. I'd like to think I had an impact here and there, but I also know for a fact that the relationship I developed with him was more impactful than anything I taught him. And the relationship he developed with Miss Sue, her family, the skills that he learned at the employment training program, like those are the things that carried on after discharge, the things that have caused him to be successful. And that's, in my mind, a good vision of, at Wedgwood and at Vander Ark, our role is to show up, to do our best, and sometimes you've got to see kids through some pretty hard stuff, and then best case scenario is they learn how to grow, like we've talked about, through a safe relationship. And as much as I want to give credit to all of these people I've mentioned in these programs, like at the end of the day, he's the one who deserves all of the credit. And it's important for us to remember that every kid, no matter how much stuff they've gone through, and no matter what ways their behavior is coming out, like they deserve love, are capable, it's there. It's just that so many facets of this world have like caused them to not be in a position to succeed. And so it's our job to hopefully get them to that position and then praise them all the way through it.
What a beautiful example of how Wedgwood kind of has this interdisciplinary, holistic approach, because employment training is not something that a clinician can necessarily provide, but because Wedgwood has all of these opportunities, this kid was really able to grow as a whole person.
Yes.
Oh, a beautiful story.
Yes. Yep, I like it as a good depiction of it's not about individuals. It's not really, dare I say, it's not even about therapy. It's about relationships and growth. And in that case, he was given the opportunities that worked for him. And there's, of course, a lot of growth still to occur in his life, but he keeps in touch with a lot of people from Wedgwood still. And so, yeah, that's a fun story to tell.
Oh, that's amazing. And you've touched on this a little bit, that work sometimes can be really tough here at Wedgwood, but you've kept coming back for almost 8 years. Why do you love your job and using your gifts and talents to work here at Wedgwood?
It's a great question that I don't have one clear answer for. I'd like to give an honest depiction of there were days where I was like, I'm done. I can't handle it anymore, especially when I was working direct care as a developmental care specialist at Vander Ark. Like, what those staff do is really, really hard work, and it's very underappreciated. And so there were days where I felt like emotionally I couldn't handle it anymore. And realistically, burnout is almost kind of become a cliche, but it's very real. And to kind of make it through your first 1 or 2 instances of feeling like fully burned out, and then come back and realize like, okay, I can do this. And, my faith also impacts that in that sometimes I might not think I've got what it takes. I might not have the right trick up my sleeve to all of a sudden cause change in this kid's life. I might be lacking in any number of ways, but at the end of the day, I got to show up for them. And in those instances, I'd like to think that God can use me in ways that I didn't really know that he could. And sometimes when I'm the least prepared is when I think that I've had the best days with the kids.
God has a funny way of doing that, doesn't he?
Yep, absolutely.
I'm going to give you a couple of... oh, no, hold on. I skipped a question.
I don't even know if I answered the last question.
That's okay. It was great. What has God made clear to you through your job and working here at Wedgwood?
Yeah, kind of like we've touched on, I think a couple things that I feel like I've learned and am continually learning is that sometimes the most Christ-like thing to do is just to show up. Don't have to overcomplicate it. Sometimes the best thing to do is not just to show up, but also shut up and like just be there. Leave all your stuff at the door. Try to, reach deep for all the empathy you can muster up. Take yourself out of it and see God in those places, in those interactions, instead of coming with my own agenda. this is like a concept I've stolen from a good friend, but I'm continually trying to learn to view my interactions with the kids as encounters with the divine directly. And it's this weird balance of, as a therapist or in social services or working with kids, everything we do is nominally about molding, treating. It's at least implicit, if not explicit, that we should be fixing kids, right? It's all about shaping and changing. While that's important, and I of course view it as my job to help spur growth with these kids, at the same time, like that's the divine that I'm interacting with every time that I hang out with one of these kids in their good moments or bad. And so recognizing that they are exactly who God made them to be, even in this moment. There's just a lot of stuff, the weight of the world that we need to tear away. The fact that these kids have been overlooked and are kind of stuck in the shadows. It's important for me to try and remember that, like this is exactly who God made them to be, even at the days where I'm like, I can't even handle you right now. So that's important for me to keep learning, and I fall short most days.
Yeah. And I mean, that's an important thing for all of us to remember, too, that we're exactly who God created us to be. And how much more powerful is that to a kid who's been told that they were worthless or been treated in a way that would make them think that you are exactly who God created you to be.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot baked in there specifically for our kids that have these developmental disabilities and limitations in that aspect. Like, their brains are different from neurotypical, quote, normal people, right? And so it gets viewed as kind of like, oh, other, right, different, as opposed to like, why don't we celebrate the incredible uniquenesses of these kids? And that's, I mean, that's probably the number one theme of why I keep coming back specifically to these kids at VanderArk, is that like, you'll never meet more unique people, and they've got gifts to offer, and sometimes I find myself learning so much from them, but yet I don't think that, specifically, of course, the kids that are stuck in residential care, their voices aren't being heard, their stories aren't being told, and so it's just this kind of, like I say, I feel like they live in the shadows, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to get to share some of the stories. Obviously, I wish I could share more details about things, but yeah.
I'm going to give you a couple of soapbox opportunities here. The first, why do you think Wedgwood is a special place, and why is this the team that people should join?
Soapbox. Honestly, for me, the reason to work at Wedgwood is the kids, of course. Yes, we've got supportive people, and hopefully we're creating a really good culture, a great place to work. But your priorities just have to be the kids. And so they need you. If there's anybody who happens to be listening to this or watching this who's, looking for an opportunity for employment, like, there are a wide range. For me, by the luck of the draw, I ended up at Vander Ark, and it was the perfect place for me. This might not be the population that speaks to you or that you get along with or that you work best with, and that is totally okay and good and great, and we got to all accept like what we can do and what we can't do, but there's a wide range of opportunities, and like the kids need your help, right? We need staff badly, and that has a direct impact. It's not just this concept you hear on the news of shortages. It means the kids don't get the services that they deserve. Not only like the services, sometimes they don't. There's not enough people to effectively care for their basic needs, right? If I've only got 2 staff and a lot of kids and more than 2 of them need help with their, some specific living skills, well, I got to shuffle, and the staff have to work even harder, and they do an amazing job making it work with what they have, like absolutely incredible above and beyond type of stuff. But the more people, the more effectively we can do that. And also the more people, the wider range of gifts and talents that we can bring to the table.
Well, thank you so much for joining me for this Wedgwood Coffee Break conversation today, Scott. And thank you for your commitment to the kids in our care. We're lucky to have you here at Wedgwood. It's a pleasure chatting with you today.